We're about to go live.
And we are unmuted.
Good. One moment. Thank you for everyone attending. We are waiting a few moments to get all of our logistics set up. Ready? Okay. So good evening to all attendees. I'd like to welcome you to the second in-person meeting for the West Contra Costa Unified School District Redistricting Commission. We are at El Cerrito High School in the library. Thank you to the district for allowing us to use this wonderful facility for this meeting. I'd like to say a few things about myself. So my name is Derekilliard. I am the commissioner for Trustee Area 5. And I'm a resident of El Cerrito. I grew up in Richmond. I am a proud graduate of West Contra Costa Unified Schools, including Juan Crespi Junior High and De Anza High School. And some of you may be asking, what is this Independent Redistricting Commission? Well, we are a commission charged with developing a map that will identify the voting areas for the 5 trustee areas used for the West Contra Costa Unified School District trustee elections beginning in the fall of 2022 and continuing through the fall of 2030. There are 7 commissioners on the commission, and each of us applied to serve, and we were selected by the retired United States District Court Judge Felton Henderson. Of the 7 commissioners, 5 of us represent a trustee area and 2 are at large, meaning that they reside within Contra Costa County, but not necessarily within one of the trustee areas. So far, what the Independent Redistricting Commission has done are we have retained legal counsel and a professional demographer to advise the commission on the process of developing a new trustee area map. We've also established a plan for public outreach. As I said earlier, tonight is the second of 5 public outreach meetings that will take place before the commission adopts a preliminary plan. The commission will hold 1 meeting in each of the 5 trustee areas. We had the first public outreach meeting last week at Pinole Valley High School. And for those of you interested in attending future meetings, the next public outreach meeting will be November 23rd at Richmond High School, November 30th at at Contra Costa College, and December 7th at Kennedy High School. We will adopt the preliminary plan on December 14th of this year. And once we adopt the preliminary plan, we will then hold 3 additional public hearings prior to the adoption of the recommended plan on January 25th, 2022, and adoption of the final districting plan on February 15, 2022, following a public hearing on the recommended plan, which will take place before the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education. And really quickly, I'd like to say one of the key goals of the Redistricting Commission's work is we want public participation and input in the drawing of these maps. Because with public input, that's one of the best ways to ensure that the map represents the interests of all district residents. Now, at this time, I would like to introduce our demographer, Dr. Lauren Collingwood, who is helping the commission develop maps. And he's going to speak to you all about the process for developing the maps and the information that is needed from community members. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Dr. Collingwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Should I, Casey, should I go now or should I just introduce myself? Okay. All right, so I have a fairly brief presentation. Last week was more in depth. And there's a little bit of feedback on my end. I don't know if you got that on your end with a little minor white noise echo type thing. Yeah, that's better. And so the data process was more, I spent more time on what data we gathered, how we went about putting these maps together, the technical side of things. So I'm going to spend less time on that today, just for brevity. But I'm happy to speak with anybody about that at any time. Try to be as transparent as possible. The general process, I have a little slide deck, but before I get into that, we proposed 4 initial maps with the goal of, the main goals of this initial set of maps are population equality per trustee seat, and then also making sure that the map is compliant with Voting Rights Act requirements, which Casey can get into a lot more if needed. And then we're hoping from the community to get additional feedback on boundary lines and edges and things like that, and whether putting certain neighborhoods together indeed makes sense. I've begun to incorporate school attendance zones for high school and elementary, but it is difficult to kind of move with all the moving pieces. So it is definitely important to get local feedback on the ground for all the different areas to make sure that as many people are satisfied and pleased by the maps as possible. So that's the main goal. So I just want the public to know that the initial proposed maps are simply initial set of maps. This is not necessarily at all what the district is going to decide on, but it's a good starting point. So I just wanted to be very clear about that, because I've seen it other times in other cases I've worked with. Sometimes it can create some challenges there. So I'm just going to go ahead and hopefully present my screen here. All right, so this is work I do. I'm also a professor at University of Mexico, but I run my own redistricting and demography research company called Collingwood Research, and I have one of my research associates, Sean Long. I'm not sure if he's in the audience tonight, but he also assists me in this process. So this is just a simple presentation, and I posted all these maps to a website that is the public can view. So the general principle presentation overview, one quick slide on districting principles, and then we'll focus on the presentation of maps with a focus on key distinctions, so that the public and commissioners and others can look at their leisure at the different maps. And what's nice is that there's both a PDF that provide demographic information, i.e. Racial distribution at varying population, citizen voting age population, and an estimate of registered voters as of 2020 in each of the census blocks that are then aggregated to each of the different seats. And so that's information that's very necessary in this process. And then there's also shape files that are available and other more technical files that other folks can use to read into different mapping and GIS programs to the extent that they have the capacity to do so. And then there's also some interactive maps shaded by different racial, ethno-racial composition of neighborhoods. So people can see how the maps play out in the different maps. So again, good districting principles. I mainly want to focus on two things. I'm going to do this fairly quickly. The first and most important thing from a constitutional perspective is the population equality. We strive to have as low deviation as possible between each of the districts. So ideally, we would have 52,158 people per seat based on adjusted population counts for the entire district of 260,791 people. But of course, that's very hard to do from a realistic perspective, given also VRA compliance in neighborhood and communities of interest concerns. And so we strive to try to keep the deviation on one side or the other less than 3% to the extent that we can. You know, the lower the better. With a max, usually from a legal perspective, a max of total deviation of 10%. And then in terms of VRA compliance, the key here is likely to be seeing if we can draw a majority Hispanic or Latino citizen voting age population seat, then with secondary examinations of both an Asian influence district and a Hispanic influence district. Okay, so that's in some ways part of what we're going to be examining. And then compactness is think of a circle. The more the circle, the better. But these other two principles fall higher on that food chain, as it were. And you'll see from some of the map proposals that's very challenging to do here. And then the contiguity requirement, for example, you can't have like an island inside wrap like one block or neighborhood wrapped around another district. That block's not touching someone else from another geographic area from that same district. So the program, the software that I use basically forces my hand on that last one. So you're not going to see any non-contiguous districts. And then looking at natural human-made boundaries, mountains, those kinds of things. The southern part of the district, right? There's a boundary. Looking at highways and stuff like that. Sometimes highways are a natural separator, but of course not always. And train tracks and things like that. Of course, sometimes they are, but not always. And then to the extent that we can, we try to respect cities, county lines, and try to incorporate. Well, county is not an issue here, but try to incorporate attendance zones and things like that. But as you'll see, that is somewhat of a challenging task here. So here's a website where we posted the first 4 maps. And so it's collingwoodresearch.com. That's my personal website, and then company website, and then general-6. Just that does happen to be the link there. And so if you click on that, I'm going to click on that. That's going to take me here to this tab here, WCCUSD. And so there's 4 proposed maps here. As we proceed, I'll go ahead and we can continue to post additional maps here. But if you scroll down,
Collingwood, can you set it up so that you'll share your web browser as well as?
Oh yeah, whoops a daisy. Yeah, same thing. It's because I don't want to, my whole thing, my whole setup there. Okay, so here is the website. Does this work now? Yep. Okay. So here are the third tab to the right. You kind of hover over it. There'll be 4 proposed maps. This is the home page here, and let's see if I can go ahead and let me see if hold on a second. I'm going to put this in the link in the chat for those online so they can easily access it. And this is in cooperation with the district council, and then this has been passed on to the commissioners. And so here there's a quick overview of what the links each contain. So the software I use to create the maps is called Maptitude. It's very well known redistricting software. There's other versions, other versions that people use, other ArcGIS or what have you. Effectively does the same thing. Sometimes maps are produced in a little bit more clean of a way or something like that, but effectively the process is the same. And so each of these links will have a PDF file separated by page by the boundaries of the district and then some demographic information. And then I also include a zip file in the links that includes a block equivalency file. That's a demographer term, which effectively means each census block So I think there's something like, memory serves, like 2,879 blocks or something like that here. I could be totally a little off there, but I think that's right if memory serves. I look at a lot of these kinds of files, so it's hard to remember the exact number all the time. And so this would be an Excel file with rows of 2,879. Each geographic block has a unique identifier, and then the block of equivalency file tells you which district that block goes into. Okay, so that's a very common thing that demographers can use. Shapefiles helps you basically for the district outline, and then for the census block, demographic data also has shapefiles, and then some of the school attendance zones in there as well that I use in my mapping software. And then once we click on this, we'll see that there is an interactive map for each district. First, this general outline, and then also shaded by percent citizen voting age population for Hispanic, Black, AAPI or Asian, and white. Okay, so people can quickly see where the kind of general tendencies are of where people live in the area. And so you want to square that with your kind of lived experiences as well. And so the first map here off to the left that I'm circling here, and I can click on one of these as an example, but we went over this one last time. This, the key here is looking at District 3. This is producing, I think, around a 52 or so, 52% Hispanic citizen voting age population seat. And District 2 is in the low 40s, I think, for African-American, Black citizen voting age population. District 5 over here, I believe I got these numbers correct this time, that is more of a Anglo-white seat in terms of the share of the population. If we're, obviously not everything's about race or ethnicity, but part of this case obviously examines that. District 4 here is more of a mashup, as it were. It's kind of a catch-all. It's pretty evenly distributed across the different populations. In District 3, this would be the ability to elect Asian seat, where the Asian concentration is the highest up here. Okay, as those of you in the audience probably are very familiar with this. The main difference between this map and this map is, and this is similar to the current map, okay, and making some small population adjustments, okay, for people moving in and out. This map number 2 takes part of, I believe, what's called the Iron Triangle, I think, is what I've heard referenced. It takes this area and moves it into District 3, because at least part of this neighborhood is very high density Hispanic or Latino. And so by doing that and then moving this district up into this neighborhood over here, you're making a higher population, citizen voting age population Latino district of 55.7% or so. This map over here is, again, this one is quite different than this one. This is probably more similar to some versions of some of the plaintiff maps that I've seen. But what this does is it connects the Black communities down in this part of Richmond with the Blacker communities up in this area. Okay, and so it's kind of got this sideways, like a C almost, right? Because there's not a lot of population over here. This is, even here, this is like, I was looking at this on the map and it was kind of weird because on some software, you don't know that this is like a kind of a swamp type area or whatever, marshland as it were. But that's why, now I see it makes sense. So it's kind of connecting this area, it's still contiguous, and putting together. And so that's pushing the Black citizen voting age population in District 2 from like 40 or so to 44, or it's something like that. And so if the commission's interested in that angle, this map and this other map is going to provide a bit of more of a cushion in that domain in terms of electing candidates or ability to elect district for African-American Black seat. So, and while you're doing that, you are taking out some of the Latino CVAP population and dropping that number down a little bit from say 56 or so, or 55.7 to maybe 53. Okay, so those are some of the things to consider. But while you're doing that with District 4 here, you pop down and grab some of these neighborhoods. Now, could be at this point, right, that some of the edges and stuff like that are, you say, okay, this, this may people here don't shop in the same neighborhoods. These parts don't maybe make as much sense. And we can try to finesse, of course, always that at the edges based on, community feedback. So this map 3 and 4 are quite similar. 1 and 2 are quite similar. There are myriad ways to examine these districts. As you can see over here, District 5 in map 4 relative to map 3 has been pushed the boundary out a bit further and now is capturing all of this area down here. The question is how many people live down here, of course, judging by the color scheme and indicating nature, it's probably not as populated as the areas over here. But that's kind of the difference with some other minor tweaks. For example, we could do some map like this and then go back to maybe this one, and then make the adjustments between this one and that one or something. That's another realistic possibility that I see in terms of drawing the districts, but also keeping the ability to elect and also the 50+1 requirement. So now if you click on one of these, it goes down and you can see here, here is, for example, you click on this PDF file, this will open up. Sometimes depending on your internet speed and whether you have a new new Mac. But here, what you can see is you have the district outline, and so it does that for each of them. And these are examples of the, this is the elementary school attendance zone, often overlapped with the high school attendance zones. I tried to the extent that I could incorporate those, but that is a challenging thing to do. And so that was one thing that I think Mr. Rafferty had suggested last time on the call, so I brought that in. And to the right here, what's presented are a different, again, this is just 2 columns with a district name, District 1, the population of that district based on the 2020 adjusted census, adjusted for prisoner population. Happy to talk more about that. Here's the actual total number deviation from the ideal of 51,000, what have you, that I presented earlier. Percent deviation, this is very good, 1.36. And then first we start with the 2020 population, and then we go to the 2015 to 2019 estimated citizen voting age population. Of course, the citizen voting age population is different than the voting age population. Happy to get into detail, but in California with large Latino, Hispanic, and Asian AAPI populations, it's important to take into account citizen voting age population and not just voting age population. And so you can see here, the AAPI population is the plurality in this district, and it's also right here, and it's also a plurality of registered voters. Okay, so you can go down and peruse these at your leisure. You could probably line this up with Google Maps on your own to kind of get a flavor, or you could look at this while you also look at the interactive map. So that's what I want to go to next. This here is the zip file with a lot of different data in there. That's more for the other kind of demographers out there. Let me just hit this again. I'm getting a 404 issue here. Okay, that's a little odd. Let me, okay. Maybe there was a link issue there on that one. But what this is that kind of outline that I just showed in terms of the base website. And so here you can go in and just like basically this is an open street map, and you can move in interactively, find your neighborhood, find different schools that you know, and look at boundaries and things like that. So it allows you to go in and out where this black line is the boundary. And moving forward, I can probably shade this a little bit more to make it more distinct. But one reason I didn't shade this is because next we overlay different racial demographics onto these maps. And so quickly here you can see map 3 is a pretty high density. District 3 here is pretty high density. If you scroll around, you can get the actual block number, voting age population, percent of Latino in this particular map, and the raw counts, right, as estimated by the 2015 to 2019 American Community Survey data. So you could zoom in here and line it up. And so, obviously you look here and say, okay, we can maybe push in this area. This looks more high density if we wanted to increase the Latino population and et cetera for a particular area of town. And then we have another map that's similar, but this now is shaded to the same 0 to 20, 20 to 40, et cetera. The main difference here is it's very similar, but the main difference here is just the shading now is Black, not Latino. And then we go down and we look at AAPI, and you can see the concentration is much higher up here in District 1, but also spread around quite a bit in some other areas. And then finally, you have percent the white CVAP here, and again, District 5 is definitely, it's fairly mixed, but it's definitely there's some wider areas in this area. And it's important to keep in mind, especially for people who don't do this professionally like I do, is you might say, oh, what's going on over here? This is a super, well, there's only 21 people over here, right? And even sometimes with the voting age population, it is an estimate. And so sometimes you get the occasional number that's a little bit of a mismatch. And I'm happy to talk more in detail about that. But for example, there's, I think, a couple blocks over here, and you're like, oh, whoa, that's a super Latino area. But sometimes this kind of hover doesn't always work as you wish. But this is, again, it's, I think there's one person who lives there. Okay, so keep all of that in mind, knowing that the population density, of course, is going to be in the kind of core area between San Pablo and Richmond and obviously parts of El Cerrito, and then more to the north in Hercules and that. So that's the basic presentation I have for today. I could talk more about the differences in the districts if people want to zoom in on certain map proposals, as it were. We can look at this interactively, but that's what I got for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Collingwood. Sure. At this time, I'd like to have our legal counsel, Casey Pitts, address the board.
Well, and I just, I wanted to make the point that as everyone knows, the reason we're here tonight is for public outreach. So hopefully people have had a chance to see the very helpful presentation and start thinking about the maps that have been proposed, and we want to hear everyone's input on those maps. The only point I wanted to make before we start the public outreach is to emphasize the importance of what the commission is doing here. And I thought I might do that by explaining sort of how I got involved in this, which is that I first became involved in these issues many years ago, bringing a lawsuit against the city of Escondido under the California Voting Rights Act. And these numbers can seem very dry, but I thought that the facts there made it clear why this really matters. That was a place that had been using at-large elections, and as a result, had never elected a Latino candidate to the Escondido City Council, despite at the time we were going in having a population that was approaching 50% Latino. So it was the Latino population there was effectively entirely disenfranchised by the electoral system that was in use. And in fact, unsurprisingly, that city council then had instituted a large range of anti-Latino policies, based on how they were elected. And so we went in and said that system needed to change to a district-based system that would enable the Latino voters in Escondido to have a say in the governance of their city. So that's what's at stake here tonight, and I think it's important for everyone. I know all the commission members and Dr. Collingwood have that in mind, but as we welcome the public's input tonight, I just wanted to set that as a starting point.
Thanks, Casey. And I'd just like to recognize Commissioner Craig Lazzaretti has joined us to solicit public outreach and public input on the proposed maps by Dr. Collingwood. Thank you, Dr. Collingwood. The 4 maps look really good, and I am pleased to see some of the adjustments between the 2 maps we had last week and the 4 maps we have this week. Gonna have to dig through the details to see which ones I like best, but this process isn't about me, it's more about the public. And at this time, I think we'd like to open it up for public input regarding the proposed maps. So please, let us know what you think.
And then members of the public on Zoom are invited to use the raise their hand function in order to note that they want to provide comment at this time. Do we have?
NAACP.
Yes, I am Willie Robinson. I guess my designation here, I didn't rename myself. I apologize for that. I got involved during the drawing of the maps and was not necessarily that moved by the maps because history of elections in this district has shown some different kinds of things. The last general, if I'm following this correctly, the last district-wide elections, we had 3 Latinos, 1 Black, and 1 white. We put the maps in place and we wound up with 3 Blacks, 1 Latino, and 1 white. What do you think that outlier is there? What, with me trying to make sure that by districts, we can bring on board persons from the various ethnic group by drawing these lines to fit the populations of voters. And is that history kind of shows that that's probably not working. So how do we, I'm just trying to assess that myself, just as a thought.
And they're still on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm muted.
As the legal counsel, I can say that, that it is the case, and I'm sure Dr. Collins would say as well, that these systems are not, that the purpose here is not to determine the outcome of elections, but to use the tools that we have to make predictions about systems that will hopefully enable, the communities of color and other communities to elect candidates of their choosing. So, but it's helpful to hear that in the past that does not seem to have been functional in the same, it does not seem to have worked out in the way that you may have hoped and others may have hoped.
Right, and I believe, as Mr. Robinson addressed, yes, this district has not been the best about seating a board that adequately represents the racial diversity of the district. And we think that with the district going to trustee areas for the elections, as Dr. Collingwood has addressed, by giving each of these trustee areas the, in a sense, power to elect candidates that reflect the ethnic breakdowns of their trustee areas. That's one step. The next step would be getting the candidates that speak for these trustee areas to engage in the elections. So it's a 2-part process, maybe even more of a process, but we're doing what we can to make sure that each of the trustee areas adequately gives a fair voice to the members of that community. And do we have any other public comments or questions? Oh, yes, we have one member in the audience here.
Hi, I'm Scott Rafferty. I was the attorney 3 years ago. I just wanted to throw out a few ideas. First, since we're in El Cerrito, is to point out that this particular district is not classically compact. But it was, in fact, El Cerrito itself was home to 3 trustees for most of the life of the school district. So collecting this high turnout area into one district was an objective that was pretty essential to make the rest of the board as a whole representative. It connects to what sometimes I guess is called the Richmond Riviera, and was informed by, my rather blunt analogy. I think I-580 there is like a socio-demographic Berlin Wall. I mean, they're just one side is much different demographic than the other. So it also reflected the de facto attendance zone for the school. The paper attendance zone was more restricted, but by tradition, this became a destination school for Matsu. So that's why the district, this particular trustee area goes and sweeps up the Riviera and Point Richmond. As to 2 and 3, the Black influence district and the Latino majority district, I just offer these thoughts. I think these are really important questions to get community feedback on. Generally, and I think here in particular, the Black community is relatively well organized. They tend to be more citizens than whites are, but even when you get to the citizens of voting age, they often control the district with less than 50%. So sometimes they would rather have more districts with 42% than fewer. Of course, there's only really one here. But I think the question is 42% enough to control a district? And on the other hand, the Latino community, even after you adjust for citizenship, is still integrating. So 50% is probably not enough. I don't think you really can go, 55% get there would probably be a good number. So it's trying to create districts which are distinct, because even though Latinos and Blacks often vote in coalition, if you can create two districts that give them each a degree of autonomy in aggregating their votes, I think that's desirable. So those are not answers from me, they're just sort of discussion starters for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Rafferty. Do we have any more comments from the public? And at this time, seeing no comments from the public, I'd like to open the floor up to any comments from commissioners.
I'll just make a couple brief comments. Sorry, maybe it's a little late tonight, so I missed the first part of Dr. Collingwood's presentation. But I look forward to diving into the maps in bigger detail in the coming week before our next public outreach meeting. And I really appreciate the work you and your folks have done so far to put together these different options for us to look at. I just want to echo what others have said, that in terms of our ultimate goal here is to create a map that is representative of the diversity of the district and which provides the best opportunity for various communities to be represented in the decision-making of this district. And I just want to assure everyone that we're all committed to making sure that is the ultimate outcome here. And the reason we brought Dr. Collingwood on is we thought he had some very specific tools, unique tools to bring to the process that goes beyond just crunching numbers or crunching census data. much more sophisticated tool set. So I think it'll be a very challenging task to ultimately determine which is the map that will best serve the interests of the voters of West Contra Costa Unified School District. I also wanted to just echo that community outreach and public outreach and community feedback and input is essential to us to be able to do our job. And so I would just encourage everyone to do all that they can to spread the word about the commission and our work. And to direct people toward the website, to the maps, to the upcoming meetings that are left. And if anyone else has any thoughts on how we can better communicate what we're doing to the broader population, please feel free to let us know. I'm a journalist by background, and one of the sad realities we're facing right now is that local news is disappearing in a lot of communities, including West Contra Costa. 10 years or so ago, there would have been much more media attention on what we were doing, and hopefully that would have helped. But unfortunately, the media coverage is very minuscule at this point. And so as residents and citizens of the area, anything that people can suggest that we can do to try to engage the public is welcome, because I think trying to make the public aware of what we're doing and get their input is crucial to the ultimate success. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Any other commissioner comments? Seeing none. Okay, well, I think we've reached the last agenda item, which is adjournment. Are you ready? Oh, we have another public comment? Okay, thank you. Sarah Butler. Thanks.
Hello. Hi, thank you for taking my call. I appreciate seeing these maps. They weren't available until today on the website, but I just wanted to ask one question or give one comment regarding like map 4. And the demographer indicated that it looked like it was in the shape of a C. So why would you want a trustee area in the shape of a C that almost feels a little bit like it's gerrymandered, just in terms of the big picture and what these trustee area look like? That isn't clear to me. I'm sure it has a lot to do with the exact demographics of each little census block, but don't you also want the trustee areas to look like a contiguous area as opposed to these really odd shapes, if at all possible? So that's just one question. And the other thing I want to say is please make sure any updates to the map gets posted to the district websites, because people aren't in the habit of looking for the demographer's website. We're used to looking for the West Contra Costa website and any updates. So thank you for your work. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Dr. Collingwood, would you like to address?
Yeah, I think thank you, Ms. Butler. So to your first question as to the shape of a C, the one of the main calls of the commission is to examine the racial demographics of the different possible districts that could be drawn. And so a lot of the times for those of us doing work related to Voting Rights Act compliance and CVRA compliance, we, in this case, we're connecting a Black community, a disproportionately Black community north of San Pablo with the southern part of Richmond effectively. And so, it's really up to the public to determine whether, and the members that reside in those communities, to the extent that they do share some sort of interest, whether that's the type of map that is of interest to them or not, right? And so that's the point of these. That's why it's also, just a proposed option. But I don't think the commissioners or me are necessarily committed, to any of the maps at this point. But we are guided by these general VRA type principles as part of our charge. Number two, in terms of getting it posted, that was, I'll take the hit on that when I was a little late getting everything sorted and put together. Just from a technical standpoint, I ran into some hiccups, but everything did get posted. And so moving forward, that, the whole system is basically set up to push forward more quickly into the WCCUSD website. So I don't anticipate to see any other delays in this respect.
And I will say that there is a link to Dr. Collingwood's website at the top of the commission's website on the West Contra Costa Unified School District website now. So that link can be found there on the district's website. And that way you can always, updates will be included as soon as they are available to Dr. Collingwood.
Before we adjourn, can we get an update on our remaining outreach meetings, when and where?
Sure. Oh, you want to address this? Okay, so the next public outreach meeting will be November 23rd, and that will be at Richmond High School. The one following that is November 30th, and that will be at Middle College, also known as Contra Costa College, in the Fireside Room, I believe. And after that, it will be December 7th at the Kennedy High School in the library, in the Kennedy High School library.
Thank you.
Great.
And just to emphasize that these meetings are held in the different trustee areas as they currently exist, but the meetings cover the same material. So if residents can't make it to the meeting in their Pacific area, they're welcome and invited to go to any of the other meetings. Just to make that point clear, folks. I know, there's some people who may not be able to make one meeting, hopefully make another one. So, and they're all available on Zoom as well.
And if you can't make a meeting in person, please attend on Zoom. And if you can't attend on Zoom, you can email myself, Commissioner Lazzaretti, or any other commissioner through our emails, which are posted on the Redistricting Commission website. Any questions, any public comment, we will review them and share them at the meetings, because just like tonight with the people who have spoken, we need that public input to help us make the best maps possible, and ones that are drawn from public input and being reflective of the public input we receive. And as Commissioner Lazzaretti stated earlier, please spread the word. Tell your neighbors, tell your friends, tell your community leaders about the commission's meetings, because this is a once in a decade opportunity for the public to give their voice to very important voting decisions that are being made. And seeing no other public comments and no other commissioner comments, we're going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you to all who attended in person. Thank you to all who attended on Zoom. Thank you to Dr. Collingwood for his very detailed maps and demographic expertise. And we look forward to seeing Dr. Collingwood and all of you at our next meeting, November 23rd, Richmond High School, or on Zoom. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.